Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph. We will be learning today Mirz Hashem Daf Tes Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn the fascinating halachas of Hilchos netillas yadayim. We pick up on Daf Tes Amid Aleph Siman Dalid Sif Vav. Says the Mechaber, Ein Tzarech Revius Netillas Yadayim L'Tfila. When we wash netillas yadayim in the morning, which the Mechaber is referring to as netillas yadayim l'tfila, because let's remember, the two primary reasons that we have for this netillas yadayim are both preparatory to Kriya Shema and Tefillah. We have the rush that you have to wash your hands because yadayim askani yisheim, and you may have touched a makom utunaf, an unclean part of the body, and therefore you have to wash your hands. We have the rajba that you're a bria chadasha, and when you wake up in the morning, you're like a kohen going to do the avodah who has to wash his hands from the kiyar. So too you need to wash your hands. Both of those are essentially preparatory to tefillah. So the way the Mechaber draws a distinction between netillas yadayim shal shachris and netillas yadayim for a seudah is that now we're speaking about netillas yadayim l'tefila. So says the Mechaber, Ein tzarech revius l'netillas yadayim l'tefila. When you wash your hands in the morning, you're not mechuyev to use a cup that could hold the minimum share of a revius, approximately 3 to 5 ounces. Now, by netillas yadayim l'seudah, you do. By netillas yadayim l'seudah, you need to wash with a cup that can hold at least a revius. You don't have to pour a revius on each hand, but the cup has to be a cup that can hold a revius. That's by netillas yadayim l'seudah, not so by netillas yadayim shel shachris. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Tes Vav, Ein tzarech ritzono loymar. What the Mechaber means when he says Ein tzarech, that you don't need a keli that could hold a revius, he means dieved in a mokum b'dieved, when you already washed netillas yadayim shel shachris and you did not wash from a keli that could hold a revius, ein ma'akiv habracha, that does not cost you the bracha. If you washed from a kais that can't hold a revius, you could still make the bracha of al netillas yadayim. U'mavarach al netillas yadayim. Aval lechatchila, however, lechatchila, says the Chavetz Chaim, toiv lahakbid shia loigam kein revius. It is better that one should be makbid, that you should have a kais that could hold a revius. Like we're going to see very shortly, the Mechaber is going to say in Siv Zayin, the koi gamal shehi aloi revius. In Siv Zayin, the Mechaber is going to tell us that it is toiv, it is good to be makbid by netillas yadayim shel shachris on all of the halachas of netillas yadayim l'seudah. One of those is that the kais has to hold a revius. So, if the Mechaber says in Siv Zayin that it's good to be makbid on such a requirement, then in Siv Vav, when he says Ein tzarech, he means b'dieved Ein tzarech. But l'chatchila, it would be good to use a kais that could hold a revius, u'kamaisha kasvu ha'achronim, like the achronim write. Now, what is this distinction between netillas yadayim shel shachris and netillas yadayim l'seudah? That netillas yadayim l'seudah needs a kais that can hold a revius, and netillas yadayim l'tefillah does not. Well, it goes back to the essence of the netillah. Why do we wash netillas yadayim before a seudah? The reason we wash netillas yadayim before a seudah is mishum srach truma. It has to do with the halachas of Tumah and Tahara. Stam yadayim shniyos heim. The Chazal gave our hands the status of a shniya l'tumah, a sheni l'tumah. Now we know that a sheni, the level of tumah of a sheni, there's an avatumah. An avatumah makes a rishon l'tumah, first level tumah. A rishon l'tumah makes a sheni l'tumah, a second level tumah. A second level tumah item could make a shlishi by truma. So the Chazal said, Stam yodayim shniyos heim. Stam yodayim are on the tumah level of a sheni l'tumah. A sheni l'tumah, if you touch truma, you could passel truma, you make the truma shlishi. So the Chazal said, since stam yodayim shniyos heim, so by a seudah, we have to wash our hands. So it's based on the halachas of Tumah and Tahara. Now by Tumah and Tahara, there is a chashivus of a revius of mayim. So there's a sheer tahara there's in the context of certain halachas, it's brought down the possibility of a mikveh ketana. You have a miniature mikveh, a little mikveh that could hold a revius. There's the possibility sometimes of being tovel amachat, a little needle inside a tiny little mikveh that's comprised of a revius shamayim. We're not going to get into the difficulties of the halachas of taharis right now, but there is a chashivus to a revius in the context of Tumah and Tahara. So since the netillas yadayim l'seudah is based on the halachas of Tumah and Tahara, so by netillas yadayim l'seudah, you need a kais that can hold a revius. But the netillas yadayim l'tefillah, that netillas yadayim, well, we have the Rush, we have the Rashba, we have Ruach Ra. According to the Rush, why are you washing your hands? You're washing your hands because yadayim askani yoseim. The hands are naturally busy, and you might have touched a makom metunuf. You might have touched an unclean part of the body, and therefore you cannot go be makabel ol malchus shemayim. You can't go recite Shemayna Esrei before you wash your hands. Ultimately, that's an inyan of nikius. That's an inyan of cleanliness. It's not an inyan of Tumah and Tahara. So there's no reason why you should require a revius for that halacha. According to the Rashba, there's more room to say that perhaps you should need a revius, because according to the Rashba, why are you washing your hands? You're washing your hands. It's not so much an inyan of nikius, it's because you're a bria chadasha. You have to thank the Rabbeinu Shalom. And we said there is a little bit of a basis of a din of Tumah and Tahara. This inyan that you're a bria chadasha, it means that the neshama left you. When the neshama left you, there's a ruach hatumah, right? We said it's like a mace. A mace, when the neshama leaves the guf, now the guf becomes tameh, because now all it is gashmias. The kedusha, the ruchnius of the neshama was removed from the guf. That created a vacuum. Now the ruach hatumah wants to go fill up that vacuum that had previously been filled up with kedusha. So according to the Rashba, there's a little bit more an inyan of Tumah and Tahara. Yet what we're going to see is that it's brought down in the pasuk. Well, I shouldn't bring down that pasuk now. We'll talk about that soon. But even according to the Rashba, there are those that say that still in all, according to the Rashba, ultimately, this netila is not based on Tumah and Tahara. It's based on this concept of bria chadasha, and you have to thank the Rabbeinu Shalom for the fact that you're a bria chadasha. But that's not something that's based on Tumah Tahara, and therefore you don't need a kais that could hold a revius. Okay, now let's go to Siv Zayin. Siv Zayin says the Mechaber, having said that you don't need a kais that can hold a revius for the netillas yadayim l'tefillah, still says the Mechaber, toiv lahakpid b'netillas yadayim shachris b'chol advarim ha'ma'akvim b'netillas yadayim l'seudah. It is good, it is preferential that we should be makbid on all the halachas of netillas yadayim by seudah for netillas yadayim shel shachris hagah. However, says the Ramah, the Mechaber says toiv lahakbid, but mihu einoi ma'akiv. We're not going to say that it's ma'akiv loy kli. You don't really need a keli for netillas yadayim shel seudah. You need a keli. Again, this is based on Tumah and Tahara. You have to wash from a keli. But for netillas yadayim l'tefillah, netillas yadayim shel shachris, strictly speaking, you don't need a keli. V'loy koyach gavra. By netillas yadayim l'seudah, lechatchila for sure, we require koyach gavra. We need the water to be poured on the hands by a person. Koyach gavra. It has to be done by a person. You can't just, stick your hand under a running faucet. You have to pour from a cup. But, says the Ramah, while you need koyach gavra for the netillas yadayim l'seudah, it's not ma'akiv for the netillas yadayim shel shachris. Ushar advar ma'poisla b'netillas haseudah, as well as the other halachas, the other items that are ma'akiv for netillas yadayim l'seudah, they're not ma'akiv b'di'evid for netillas yadayim shel shachris. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut into zayin. Eino ma'akiv for tzayno loymar. What the Ramah wants to say is, di'evid, again, like he said in his cut in tezvav, b'di'evid le'inyan habracha. If you washed netillas yadayim shel shachris, not from a keli, you didn't use koyach gavra le'inyan bracha, it's not ma'akiv. Yuchal avarach al netillas yadayim. You can make the bracha al netillas yadayim. Or you could even do this initially. You could even do it lechatchila. You don't have a kais. So the only way you could wash netillas yadayim l'tfila, netillas yadayim shel shachris, is by going to the faucet and turning on the faucet, turning it on and off 3 times to wash your hands. So you could even do that lechatchila if you have no other choice. But if you have the possibility of doing it the right way, you should be makbid on all of the requirements for netillas yadayim shel seudah. The Ramah gave examples, and he said what are some of the things that are ma'akiv for netillas yadayim for seudah, but they're not ma'akiv for netillas yadayim shel tefillah. Eis katan yud zayin loy kli. You don't have to have a keli. Ritzainer loymar. When the Ramah says that b'diavad, you don't have to have a keli for netillas yadayim shel shachris, you should know, Ritzainer loymar demahani af lahav ruach ra. You could even take off the ruach ra without having a din keli. What does this mean, a din keli? So it explains the Chavetz Chaim, therefore, im ein loy kli sholem. If you don't have a complete keli, muter liter mikli nakov. You could wash your hands netillas yadayim shel shachris with a keli that has a hole in it. What's the chiddush over there? Well, when a keli has a hole in it, depending on the size of the hole, and depending on the size of the keli, at some point the keli loses the din of a keli. It's no longer considered a keli in the context of the laws of Tumah and Tahara. Therefore, says the Ramah, you should know that even though lechatchila, toiv lahakbid, we would rather that you should be makbid on all of the requirements on netillas yadayim l'seudah for netillas yadayim shel shachris. One of those requirements is that for netillas yadayim shel seudah, you need a keli. Not only do you need a keli, it has to have a din kli. It cannot have a hole in it big enough that renders it no longer a keli in the context of the halachas of Tumah and Tahara. But for the netillas yadayim shel shachris, you could use such a keli, and if you do use such a keli, not only is it okay according to the Rosh and the Rashba, it will even be efficacious to remove the ruach ra that rests on the hands when you get up in the morning. So it'll work for that as well. You could also wash your hands from a pump. Even though when you wash your hands from a pump, what does that mean? It means you open up the pump and you let the water go on your hand, right? So there's no koyach gavra. You didn't pour the water on the hands. Now for the netillas yadayim shel seudah, we paskin, the Mechaber paskins, that you need koyach gavra. You need a person to pour the water on the hands. The netillas yadayim shel shachris, strictly speaking, you do not need koyach gavra. Kamavur lekaman bilchus netillas yadayim. But if you just dip your hands into the water, so you have a body of water, and you dunk your hands in the water, that will not work to remove the ruach ra from the hands, like we will see shortly in Sif Katan Yud Beis. So again, to wrap up over here what the Mechaber has said, in Sivav the Mechaber told us you don't need a keli that could hold a revius. When you wash the netillas yadayim shel shachris, you don't have to wash from a keli that can hold a revius, even though by netillas yadayim l'seudah, you do need a keli that could hold a revius. In Siv Zayin, the Mechaber went ahead, and the Mechaber told us, even though we see that netillas yadayim shel shachris is very different than netillas yadayim shel seudah, still, ultimately, toiv lahakbid, it would be good to be makbid on all of the requirements of netillas yadayim shel seudah for netillas yadayim shel shachris, said the Ramah. However, it's not ma'akiv. These halachas are not ma'akiv. So even though you need koyach gavra for netillas yadayim shel seudah, you don't need koyach gavra for netillas yadayim shel shachris. Even though you need a keli for netillas yadayim shel seudah, you don't, strictly speaking, need a keli for netillas yadayim shel shachris. And therefore, if you use a broken keli, which would not be good for the netillas yadayim shel seudah, because it doesn't have a din kli, it is good for the netillas yadayim shel shachris, and not only that, it will even take off the ruach ra. It'll even be effective to remove the ruach ra from the hands. Okay, says the Mechaber Sivches. Just keep on getting disturbed over here with alerts. Okay, says the Mechaber Sivches. Netillas yadayim shachris. When it comes to netillas yadayim shachris, ein neitlen al gabe karka. You should not wash netillas yadayim over the ground, so that the netillas yadayim, the negel vas of water, is just going on the floor or on the ground. Elo l'sach keli, you should make sure to wash into a keli so that you could take that water and you could properly dispose of it. We don't want you to just wash onto the ground where somebody might step into it or somebody might otherwise come into contact with it. Why? Because that water is now imbued with ruach ra. That is the water that washed the ruach ra off your hands. And now that water has ruach ra. So we don't want somebody to come into contact with it lest he come to harm. So better wash into a keli and then take the water from that keli and dispose of it properly. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Karka, you should not wash over the karka. Va'afilu al gabi kismim aser. It would even be aser to wash with this water into a pile of wood chips. Because that water is going to be contained within this pile of wood chips, and it's water that has ruach ra in it, and therefore we don't want you to wash in it. You test keli, you should wash into a keli. The based on this, the Chavetz Chaim says it would be good that you should have 2 kelim by your bedside. Echad mole, one prepared and filled with water that you're going to use for the netillas yadayim. The echad reikon, and an empty keli that you're going to pour the netillas yadayim water into. You're going to pour it over your hands into this otherwise empty keli. The Shulchan Aruch Harav brings down that the keli that you're going to pour the netillas yadayim water into should preferably be a kli ma'us. It should be a disgusting, so to speak, keli. Why? Because that way we're sure that you will never come to use that water. If you're taking the water and you're pouring it into a kli ma'us, so then everybody understands that that's wastewater. That's not water that anybody is going to come to use. Okay. Sif test, says the Mechaber. Mayim shel netillas yadayim, water that was used for the netillas yadayim shachris, also lehanos mehem, you're not allowed to derive any benefit from that water. V'lo yishbechem babayis, you should not pour it out in the house. V'lo b'makom she'over misham b'nei adam, you should not pour it anywhere where people will pass by and maybe come into contact with that water. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Chaf, mehem, you're not allowed to derive benefit from that water. Al kain, therefore, lo yitneim lufnei behemtoi. So one example of this would be, you should not use it to give water to your animals. If you have animals that you need to supply with water, you have chickens out in the backyard, don't take the used negelvasa water and take it out for the chickens. You're not allowed to derive benefit from that water. Ois cotton chaf aleph, the Mechaber said you shouldn't put it in a place where people are going to pass through it, because people will come into contact with this water and they could potentially come to harm because of the ruach ra. So what should you do with it? You should pour it in a sloped area where it will run away and it will go away somewhere where people won't come into contact with it. Or you should pour it into loose earth where it will quickly get absorbed into the ground and nobody will come into contact with it and come to harm. Sif Yud, says the Mechaber, Noitel Kli Shalmayim, very interesting. How are we supposed to go ahead and wash this netillas yadayim? So the Mechaber lays out the exact process of washing netillas yadayim. Noitel Kli Shalmayim biyad yaminoi. You should pick up the cup of water in your right hand, then give it to the left hand, so that the left hand should pour water over the right hand first. So, okay, let's start from the beginning. We're going to wash the right hand first. This is something that we've seen already many times, that we give precedence to the right hand, especially in all inyanim of mitzvah, of kedusha. We always give preference, we always give kedima to the right. So certainly we want to wash the right hand before we wash the left hand. Now, having said that, really what you would think is, what you could do is put the cup under the faucet, turn on the faucet, fill the cup up with water, pick up the cup in the left hand, and use the left hand to pour over the right hand. So you gave kedima to the right hand. You washed the right hand first. Says the Mechaber, no, that's not what you should do. The Mechaber says, noitel kli shel mayim biyad yaminoi. You should lift up the cup of water with your right hand, and then v'noisnoi liyad smoiloi, give it to the left hand. So don't pick up the kais in the left hand. Pick up the kais in the right hand, and then give it to the left hand. And then you're doing that so that now the left hand will pour onto the right hand first. But the thing that still requires explanation is, why does the Mechaber say that you should not pick up the kais in your left hand? Instead, you should pick up the kais in the right hand, give it to the left hand, and then the left hand should pour on the right hand. Why do you need that extra step? Why not just have the left hand pick up the kais in the first place? Why do you have to pick it up in the right hand and give it to the left hand? So let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. It says the Mishnah Berurah is cut chav beis. V'noisnoi. You pick up the kais in the left hand, in the right hand, I'm sorry. You pick up the kais in the right hand and you give it over to the left hand. Why? Kedei sheyizgaber yamin shehu chesed. This shows that the right hand, which represents the midah of chesed, is overpowering al smoil over the left hand, shehu din, which represents judgment. It represents din. So the right hand represents chesed, it represents kindness. The left hand represents judgment. What we want to show is that the right hand that represents chesed is more powerful than the left hand that represents din. How do we show that? We show that the left hand is not empowered at all. The only power that the left hand has is what is given to it by the right hand. So you fill up the kais with water. Do you pick it up with the left hand? No, because the left hand is not its own independent entity. It doesn't have power on its own. You pick up the kais in the right hand. Then the right hand gives it to the left hand. So the right hand now empowers the left hand to do what? To wash the right hand. So all of the chshivus is coming from the right hand. It's the right hand empowering the left hand. But the left hand on its own has no power at all. That's why the left hand cannot pick up the kais on its own. So again, it's cut chav beis. Kedeshi is gaber yamin shu chesed, so that the right hand, which represents chesed, should overpower al smoiloi over his left hand shu din, that represents din, strict judgment. The gambi iter is lean on basa yamin da alma, and even by a lefty should comport himself like everybody else does, like the majority of people who are right-handed. The lefty should also pick up the kais in his right hand and give it to his left hand, so that his left hand should pour on the right hand first. Okay, now we go to Sif Yod Aleph. Lo yital mimi shaloi natal yadav shachris. You should not allow your hands to be washed in the morning by somebody who has not yet washed netillas yadayim. That's what this means. Lo yital. You should not allow your hands to be washed. That means you're going to hold out your hands, and somebody else is going to pour the water over your hands. Do not allow somebody who has not yet washed netillas yadayim to wash your hands netillas yadayim. And this has nothing to do with him touching you. He doesn't have to touch your hands. He doesn't do anything. You're holding your hands out over the sink, and he's taking a cup and he's pouring over your hands negelvasser. Says the Mechaber, do not allow that to be done by somebody who he himself has not yet washed netillas yadayim. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut chav gimel. Lo yital, what does that mean? That you should not be washed? Ritzainer Loimar, what the Mechaber wants to say is, Lishpaich loy al yadav, that this person is going to pour the water over your hands. Aval lahavi loy mayim. But if somebody who did not yet wash netillas yadayim wants to bring you water, you could allow him to bring you water so that you could then use that water to wash netillas yadayim. But you can't let him do the netillas yadayim washing, that you're going to hold out your hands and he's going to pour the water over your hands. By netillas yadayim seudah, it would be mutter litoil to allow your hands to be washed from somebody who he himself did not wash his hands. What's at play over here? Why is it that you should not let somebody who has not yet washed netillas yadayim wash your hands? Well, it's interesting. There's a Gemara in Brachos, an Aleph Amid Aleph. The Gemara says, we know that one of the Tanoim that went up to Shemayim by uttering a name of Hashem, and he went up to Shemayim. The Gemara in Chagiga talk all about the Mishnah Berurah, talks about Arba Shenichtas Sha'al Pardes, the 4 Tanoim that went up to Shemayim alive. They said a shame and they went up to Shemayim. There's a machlokes Rishonim. Doesn't mean actually that they did go up to Shemayim. Rashi seems to learn that they taka went up to Shemayim. Taisus seems to learn that they didn't actually go up to Shemayim. They were down here on this earth, but they saw things and they experienced things as if they were in Shemayim. But in any case, one of them was Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. So the Gemara here in Brachos that Aleph Amid Aleph says, Amar Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha said, Shloisha dvarim sachli surreal sar hapnim. There were 3 things that I was told by the Malach Suriel, Sar HaPnim, the minister of the interior. Sar HaPnim, the innermost minister up in Shemayim. It seems that this Malach had access to the Rabbanu Shalom, whatever that means. And Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha said, this Malach Suriel told me 3 things. One of them was a halacha that we learned already. Al titel chalukcha b'shachris miyad hashamish v'tilbash. Do not have your shamish give you your begadim in the morning. You should pick up your begadim from where they are. Don't have a misharis give you the begadim in the morning. Second halacha is the halacha that we're learning now. Val titel yodecha mimi shaloi natal yodav. Do not allow your hands to be washed by somebody who he himself did not yet wash the netillas yadayim. And the third one, Va'al taxir kais espargus. Do not return the kais espargus, and we'll see what that means at a different point. Now, why are these 3 things true? So the Malach told Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha, Mipnei shetichaspis, there's a group of damaging malachim called tichaspis. V'amri istalgonis. Some say it was called istalgonis. Shal malachi chavala. These are harmful malachim of some kind. Mitzapin loyla adam. They wait for a person. V'aimrim, and they say emas hayava adam lidei echad me'advarim halalu v'yalached. When will one of these 3 things happen to somebody, and then we will be able to capture him? So basically what the Gemara over here is showing is Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha was saying that I heard from Surreal Malach HaPnim that there are 3 things that a person should never do because they're exceedingly dangerous. One of them is this halacha over here. Do not let somebody who has not yet washed the netillas yadayim wash your hands for the netillas yadayim. Now, why is that? What's the problem with that? He's not coming into contact with your hands, so there's no ruach ra problem. What's the problem? What's wrong with letting somebody who did not yet wash the netillas yadayim wash my hands, the netillas yadayim? So the truth is, it's brought down from the Zohar, and the explanation seems to be that the pasuk says in the context of Tumah and Tahara, v'hiza hatahar al hatameh. When we speak about the mei para aduma, the water that had the ashes of the para aduma in it, that water was used for sprinkling on somebody who was tamei meis to make him tar. And the pasuk says, "V'hiza hatahar al hatamei." The one who does the sprinkling of the mei chatas has to be tahar. He is a hatar, a person that's tahar, will be mazeh, he will sprinkle the mechatas al hatame, on the one who's tameh. So you need somebody who's tahar to do the sprinkling onto the person who's tameh. So too over here, you have ruach ra on your hands. This ruach ra, aka also known as ruach hatoma. So if you have a ruach hatoma on your hands, now you want to take somebody who has not yet washed netillas yadayim. So he has ruach hatoma on his hands. So that's not a tahar being mazeh al hatame. That's a tameh being mazeh al hatame. He himself still has ruach hatoma on his hands. He can't remove the ruach hatoma from your hands if he still has ruach hatoma on his own hands. That's what's brought down over here. Okay, Ice Cut L'Chav Dalid. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the Mechaber said that you should not have somebody who did not yet wash the netillas yadayim shel shachris wash your hands the netillas yadayim shel shachris. Mimi shaloy, Ice Cut L'Chav Dalid. U'menetila la'achila rashoy. However, when it comes to the netillas yadayim l'seudah, over there it's mutter, rashoy, lito mimi shaloy natal yadav. For a seudah, you could have somebody who didn't wash for the seudah wash your hands. So again, here we have an interesting distinction. Netillas yadayim l'seudah, over there, you want to hold out your hands and have somebody else who's not washing wash your hands. That you could do. Netillas yadayim shel shachris, over there you cannot do it. Why? He's a hatar al hatame. How about by seudah? By seudah, for some reason, it's okay. Okay. Now we go to Sif Yud Beis. Says the Mechaber, Im shichshech yadav l'soich kli shamayim. If somebody dunked his hands into a keli of water, so he got up in the morning, he knows he has to wash the netillas yadayim shel shachris. He doesn't have a kais, but what he does have is he has a bucket of water. So what he did is he dunked his hands into the bucket of water. Does that work? Says the Mechaber, Im shichshech yadav l'soich kli shamayim. If he dunked his hands into a bucket of water, also like netila l'kriyas shema v'letfila, this washing is effective for the netillas yadayim shel shachris. It works for kriyas shema and for davening. Aval lo l'ruach ra she'alehen. However, it is not effective to remove the ruach ra. Why is this? Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in chafei. L'kriyas shema v'letfila, for the purposes of kriyas shema and tefillah, this works v'yuchal avarach al netillas yadayim, and you can make the bracha al netillas yadayim. Why does it work? Well, now let's take a minute to break this down in the context of what we know already. So, okay, why are you washing the netillas yadayim shel shachris? According to the Rosh, the reason you were washing the netillas yadayim shel shachris, yadayim askani oisheim, your hands are very busy. They probably or almost inevitably touched a makom mechusa on the body while you were sleeping. Therefore, right now your status is you have yadayim mitunafais, you have dirty hands. Therefore, you cannot say Kriya Shema, you cannot recite Shemona Esrei, you can't daven Shemona Esrei. Okay, so you have to wash the netillas yadayim. So what did you do? You dunked your hands into a bucket of water. Is that effective? Well, ultimately, according to the Rosh, this is all a din of netillas. It's a din of cleanliness. You touched dirty areas of the body, you have to wash your hands. By dunking your hands into a bucket of water, guess what? You washed your hands. So according to the Rosh, it would seem that this should be effective. According to the Rashba, why do you have to wash your hands according to the Rashba? According to the Rashba, you have to wash your hands because you're a Berei Chadasha. You're a Berei Chadasha. You have to thank the Rabbeinu Shalom, and you wash your hands like a Kohen who washed his hands from the Kiyar before he went to do the Avodah. Now, when the Kohen washed his hands from the Kiyar, how did he wash his hands? He filled up a keli, and he used a keli to pour the water over his hands. Oh, but over here you didn't use a keli. Over here you just dunked your hands in a bucket of water. So is that effective according to the Rashba? Does that cover you according to the Rashba? Says the Mechaber, yes. Because the Mechaber says, Im shichshech yadav l'sech kli shamayim, Also, like netillas, kriya shvav l'tefillah. The Mechaber says, and he doesn't draw any distinction between different shittas. So the Mechaber says that dunking your hand into a bucket of water is effective for netillas yadayim shel shachris. So it seems that it's effective both according to the Rosh, both according to the Rashba. Now, how about the Ruach Ra? Is this effective to remove the Ruach Ra? Well, over there the Mechaber said no. Avaloi l'Ruach Ra shalein, it does not remove the Ruach Ra. Why? Why doesn't it remove the Ruach Ra? So let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah Chafei. L'kriya shvav l'tefillah, dunking your hands in a bucket of water is effective for netillas yadayim shel shachris. V'yuchal levarach al netillas yadayim, and you can even make a bracha on netillas yadayim. You know why? Well, according to the Rosh, we don't seem to need an explanation why. According to the Rosh, it seems to be pashut why. Because all it is a question of netillas. It's only a question of cleanliness, of washing your hands. So all right, you washed your hands. But how about according to the Rashba that you're like a kohen before doing the avodah? So says the Mishnah Berurah, Darminan bekiyar, because in the context of the kohen washing from the kiyar, it says verachatzu mimenu. You have to wash from the kiyar. That the implication is you're taking water from the kiyar, and then you're washing with that water. How do you do that? You fill up a keli from the kiyar, and then you use the keli to pour over your hands. And we darshan v'rachatzu mimenu v'loi b'soichai. You have to wash from the kiyar, but not in the kiyar. So you cannot dunk your hands into the kiyar. What do we learn from that? Ha ba'alma afilu b'toichai. This would seem to be a din by the kiyar. By the kiyar, there's a din. You have to wash mimenu. You have to wash from it. V'loi b'soichai, you're not in it. So by the kiyar, there's a halacha that you cannot dunk your hands into the kiyar and make them tar. But the implication is that that's only a halacha by the kiyar. So we're not dealing with the kiyar. We're dealing with a negavasa shissel. So if you're dealing with a negavasa shissel, you're not dealing with a kiyar over there, even according to the Rashba. Because the Rashba says we're like a kohen washing for the avodah. This is exactly where we have this drasha, by a kohen washing from the kiyar. Right? So according to the Rashba also, you can dunk your hands into a bucket, and that will be effective for the netillas yadayim shel shachris. Aval, however, continues the Mishnah Berurah, lahavir ruach ra, but to take the ruach ra off the hands, for that boy irui shalish pa'amim dafka. For that you need pouring on the hands 3 times. Now, why? Why do you need pouring from the hands 3 times in order to remove the ruach ra? And that's going to be a question that the Mishnah Berurah is going to deal with now. There's 2 ways to look at it. One way to look at it is that it's a din of a keli. We said yesterday that this ruach ra that rests on the hands, the Gemara calls her a bas chayrin. She sets the rules. She decides what she needs in order to leave the hands. So maybe she decided that in order for her to leave the hands, you need to pour water from a keli 3 times on the hands. That could be. Now, if that's true, so then it's a din in a keli. You need a keli. You need to pour water on the hands from a keli. But then there's another possibility. Maybe the reason is because when you pour water from a keli, each time fresh water is landing on your hands. So you have a ruach ra on your hands. You pour water on your hands once. Now you pour fresh water a second time. Now you pour fresh water a third time. That removes the ruach ra. Now, compare that to when you dunk your hands in a bucket. When you dunk your hands in the bucket, you have now inserted the ruach ra into the water that's in the bucket. Now you take your hands out and you dunk your hands a second time. Now you're dunking your hands into water that has ruach ra in it. The water that has ruach ra in it is not going to remove the ruach ra. So maybe that's why we need to pour 3 times from a keli. So maybe it's not a din in a keli. It's not that this bas chayrin needs a keli. It's just a din that in order to get rid of the ruach ra, you need fresh water. And over here, you don't have fresh water. Lamai nafkamina. I'll tell you what the nafkamina is. How about if I have 3 buckets? So I'll dunk my hands into 1 bucket, take them out. Now I go to a second bucket, dunk my hands into a second bucket. This second bucket, it didn't have ruach ra in it. Now, after I dunk my hands in, it does. Now I take out my hands and I go to a third bucket. Again, it's fresh water. I dunk my hands in there. So now I dunked my hands in fresh water 3 times. Maybe that could remove the ruach ra. So again, what we're struggling with over here is, why do we need to pour 3 times from a keli? Is it a din in a keli? Is it a din that in order to remove ruach ra you have to pour from a keli? Or is it just a din that you need fresh water 3 times? Now let's take a look here inside of the Mishnah Berurah. Let's go back to the Mishnah Berurah right by the Ois Katan Lamed Hey for the Sharatzia. It says the Chavetz Chaim, Avo, lahavir ruach ra, in order to remove the ruach ra from the hands, boy iroi shalish pa'amim dafka, you need to pour on the hands 3 times. V'shikshach bikli, dunking your hands in a keli, afilu mea pa'amim, even if you do it 100 times, loy chashiv el echad, it's only worth doing it once. Why? Shemiyad nitmu amayim v'havim k'may shaychin. Because after you dunk your hands in the bucket the first time, you have now rendered that water full of ruach tumah, full of ruach ra. So now you want to use that water to wash off the ruach ra? You can't do that. That's not going to work. In the words of the Chavetz Chaim, v'havyon k'may shaychin. Now that water is like shaychin, which is wastewater. You cannot use wastewater in order to remove ruach ra from the hands. So this water that's in the bucket, if you dunked your hands into it, now it's shaychin. Now it's not usable anymore to remove ruach ra. So if you dunk your hands in it another 100 times, it's not worth anything. And that's why we're going to see very shortly in the end of Sif Katan Yud Beis over here, which we didn't read yet, where the Mechaber is going to be mesupik about the case that I gave you. What if you dunked your hands first in one bucket, then in a second bucket, then in a third bucket? In switched off water. You switched off waters 3 times. So you had fresh water each time. The efsher, maybe, the lav dafke irui be'inon lahaver ruach ra. It's not a vart that we need pouring from a keli 3 times to remove ruach ra. And really, vafila rechitza sagi. Really, just washing the hands, dunking it in a bucket is enough. The problem is that we have to have fresh water. So, okay, if you're using 3 different buckets, if you're using mayim mechulafin, so you got 3 times fresh water, maybe that's okay. Or maybe, or maybe, in order to remove ruach ra, you taka need pouring on the hands 3 times from a keli. Because of a Prima God writes to Lefizah according to this, in Tachav Yadem Anar Shalish Pamim, how about if you dunked your hands in the river 3 times? The river is flowing, it's constantly fresh water. Or it's snowing outside, so you dunked your hands in the snow in 3 different places. Again, you got fresh water each time. The Prima God says, because of this doubt, it's really only efficacious for netillas yadayim shel shachris to allow you to daven, but not to remove the ruach ra. V'yuchal levarach on netillas yadayim, and therefore you can make the bracha on netillas yadayim because the Rosh and the Rashba you're being mekayim. Avol safik imahani lav ruach ra, but there's a doubt whether or not that removes the ruach ra. The ulai beino lozeh irim mikli, because it's possible that to remove the ruach ra you need pouring from a keli. V'artzes achayim levushei srad pasku the benar v'chem yishelig v'mei mikva mahani aflahav ruach ra. They paskin that indeed sticking your hands 3 times into a river or into 3 different places in the snow or into a mikveh would work to take off even the ruach ra. V'afilu ein behem arba misa v'ayin sham oid ba'artzos hachayim. Okay, so what the Mechaber has said over here so far was, we're going to have to stop over here, but I just want to recap what the Mechaber has said so far here in the beginning of Sif Yud Beis. He's telling you if you dunk your hands, you woke up in the morning, you're not in your normal situation, you don't have a keli to wash negelvasa from, so you just dunked your hand into a bucket. Says the Mechaber, you could make it on netillas yadayim. You're mekayim netillas yadayim shel shachris. You're mekayim the rush, you cleaned your hands from a makah betunif. You're mekayim the rashba, you washed your hands, you're a beri chadasha, and you washed your hands. You didn't use a keli? Well, we learn out from the kiyar that it's only by the kiyar itself that this halacha pertains, that you have to wash from it, not in it. But everywhere else, you can even dunk your hands. So the Rashba, you seem to be okay. Question is Rachra. Rachra, we're not sure. Why are we not sure? Well, we are sure. We're sure that you cannot dunk your hand 3 times in the same bucket. Because once you dunked your hand in the bucket the first time, you now rendered that water full of Rachra. Now that water has the din of Shayvchin, and you cannot use Shayvchin to remove Rachra. The question would be, what if you have 3 buckets? You dunk your hands once in one bucket, once in another bucket, once in another bucket. Over there, we're Mesupik, and we will continue in this topic at greater length tomorrow, Yis Hashem. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The seudah of limud HaTorah should be begging against Klal Yisrael. The Rabban Shalom should send Yeshua for us, Parnas, and Shidduchim to all those in need, and we should be zeicher to see the B'yeskel Tzedek, B'mher v'yameinu, Amen. Be well.